Star Trek Discovery, Season 5. This is a spoiler review. I have a review up on my blog, sounderbetonmyhead.com. Pretty much no spoilers in there, which is probably why it's like fairly short, and I think it feels a little incomplete because it's hard to talk about a 10 episode season without getting really too much of the spoilers. I am giving this season a 2.5 out of 5. I actually considered just giving it a 2, but there was enough in there that kind of carried me over that I was a little more generous with my grade. Of course, the big thing with the season is that they filmed it where they were done, and then a couple months later, they announced that it was canceled, but they did allow them to go back and film some more stuff to turn it from a season finale to a series finale. I was definitely curious to see what that would look like. I know they got almost all the actors back for the reshoots. I believe Dr. Colbert wasn't involved in any of that, but we'll get to that at the end of this breakdown a little bit here. The gist of the season was basically there's this very important technology that shows up. It's on this 800-year-old Romulan scout ship. They go to check it out. Come to find out, it's supposed to lead to what they're calling the progenitors, which is the race that they found on Star Trek The Next Generation that apparently were the only humanoids out there, the only life in the galaxy as far as they knew, at least, that type of sentient life. So they went and seeded planets all over the place to create, life forms similar to them. Obviously, evolution on each planet was different. So then you got Klingons and Cardassians and humans. And it was basically a way for the writers of Star Trek to kind of explain why most of the aliens we see basically look kind of the same, except for, some head ridges or, a couple, funny looking nose or whatever. It's just like, oh yeah, well, they all have a common ancestor. Still don't think they really paid off digging into that. Basically, we found out a group of scientists was sent in to try to find this technology. They did. They decided it was too dangerous, so they hid it. But they thought eventually it could be beneficial, so they left clues so that somebody someday could track this down and use it properly. So basically, this season is Discovery trying to find these different clues and making their way to this tech. And it's like this, I don't know, that part was a little anticlimactic because they do kind of meet a progenitor, but they don't get any information from her. You don't really learn that much more than Picard got from that hologram back in the day. They show her this tech, and she's like, I don't know what to do with it. We really don't need it. And then she just pitches it, basically. So nothing really was learned. It was just about this big quest that basically led to something that they decided just to bury. They said the plot itself wasn't anything spectacular. I thought the journey was mixed. I think what really hurt the Mal and Locke section is I did like the little cat and mouse, and they were, as you got to know them, you kind of started to root for them a little bit, and you got to see that they did a lot of bad stuff, but they weren't necessarily bad people. Just they were put in a shitty situation, and you had a little sympathy for their cause. But then, getting there in the end, Locke accidentally kills himself to help them try to escape. And this Mal just gets kind of unlikable. She teams up with the Brain. She's kind of a bitch, basically, and this, this lost that dynamic of just two people in over their head trying to just stay afloat, and they basically had this bounty on their head by the Breen. And once it got into the Breen and these politics, it just didn't quite work. And then it's you get this new Breen bad guy, and then he gets killed off fairly quickly, and then somehow Mal takes over his faction. And I don't know, it didn't, that part of it kind of fell flat. I don't know how they could have kept going with the original concept with it, but I don't know, I just think the Breen stuff just didn't pan out. I think the show was a little bit more successful with the character arcs. And it's weird because they didn't know this was going to be a final season, but a lot of stuff they were doing kind of felt like they could have been setting up for a season-ending, character arc for a lot of these characters. Or, there's some interesting things going on. Okay, they pay this off, especially with the reshoots. This could be pretty cool, but the reshoots, I guess, apparently didn't address any of this stuff, and some of it just kind of felt flat in the end. I think the biggest surprise of the season was Raynor. Very gruff, very, people try to call him somewhere between a Captain Jellicoe and a Captain Shaw, and I think that's about right. So I liked his his interaction with the crew overall, because at first he's just a jackass, and then he kind of starts learning from the crew, and this it was a slightly rushed story arc because it's like he got this character for one season basically, but I think it worked for him. I'm not sure how I feel about it. They had a pretty massive reveal that after all this time, even with this Kovich, who's always been a little mysterious, we found out that evidently he's actually Agent Daniels from Star Trek Enterprise. It's a little weird thing. I have a feeling this might not have been planned the whole time, but it was an interesting twist that he's still involved in all this stuff, so that's fine. And then we get to the end. Best I can tell, the wedding was always on there. So like you wrap up the mission, you have Saru's wedding, which is fine. And then I think everything after that was apparently what they reshot. So this is my slight disappointment. It's like, okay, I wasn't expecting necessarily a time jump with everybody. Like, hey, let's jump ahead and see like what happens to all our favorite characters in like a few years, especially with Starfleet Academy coming out. But I was a little disappointed that we did do a time jump, and it's like on one end, we saw what happened to Burnham in book, and we get a mention about Tilly, still being at the Academy as an instructor. So it's like I kind of wanted to see what would happen to everybody else, but the other end, kind of want to see it happen if they pop up on Starfleet Academy or another show or whatever. But the only thing that sucks is like we're doing these reshoots, we're gonna wrap up Discovery, and it's all Burnham. The whole back half of the thing is Burnham, and then a little bit of book and all that. But it's like, and I know the series has kind of been the book or the Burnham show, but this really hammered home. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, Burnham's what's important about Discovery. So like that was slightly disappointing, but it was interesting. But then they just really bent over backwards to end the show in a way that tries to pay off that short trek about the Calypso about Discovery being stranded for like 1,000 years, and there seemed to be some continuity breaks because that version of the ship was a classic version, or in the future it's got refit. It's a Discovery A, it's got the detachable nacelles, and this is kind of weird. They unrefit it, changed it back to the regular Discovery, and sent on this mission. Just, like I said, they get really bent over backwards trying to like end the series in a way that kind of pays off this kind of mediocre way. It's like a lot of people like that short, that's fine, and they're glad that it's canon, but it didn't feel like, oh, what happens next when you're done with that short? You're like, oh, okay, it's over. And I don't know, they said the show had another way of paying it off. Maybe at the end of like 7 seasons, they're like, okay, then this happens, and this is how it gets back to Calypso. And they were like, well, I guess we got to wrap it up. I guess that's it for like the show itself. I do with shows, TV shows, I like to take some notes. So let me see if there's anything on here I want to mention that I haven't already mentioned. I did get a kick out of the Soong type android that they encountered. Kind of an oddball version of like a Data, basically, like weird, saying everything spicy. He was pretty intriguing, and then they killed him off. But he was quite old, so I'm hoping maybe he's still alive in the 24th century. So maybe we see him pop up like there's not really too many shows happening right now in that era, like unless they do a sequel to Star Trek Picard. But it'd be kind of cool if he popped up somehow away, because I kind of dug his character. Second episode. One thing that was weird is like, okay, there's this top secret thing about the progenitor. Like, no one's supposed to know about it. Like, Burnham had to kind of go like up and under to find out what this is all about. And finally he's like, okay, this is what our big top secret thing is. And then it's like 5 minutes later, like everybody in Discovery knew what it was. And it's like, okay, I guess it's not that big of a secret anymore. Get to episode 3. I think that's, they had to go to Trill. And you had a weird scene where they had to fight those giant cloaking bee things. And it just kind of felt weird. There's like 2 episodes in a row where like Burnham and somebody are hiding behind like rocks and stuff to like dodge enemy fire. It just felt a little redundant at that time. It's like, really, that's every clue's gonna involve them hiding behind shit until like they could get past it. But luckily that was kind of the last of that. Episode 4 is probably my favorite. We got a time travel episode, or time loop, or whatever you want to call it. It was just kind of cool seeing different eras. Like we see Discovery being built, we see season 1, we see different seasons. Felt like it could have gone a little bit grander, but again, like this is something I think you would do if they knew it was a final season. Like I think you would have got Lorca back. I think you would have did some other stuff here to like kind of really make it feel like, wow, this is like the final season. But I think for what they had, I thought it was pretty cool. Obviously, a lot of the episode was about Raynor learning to work with the crew the way that they're used to being worked with, and it was fine. I think it helped speed his character's arc enough to make him bearable, because he was such a jackass the first couple episodes. Not much about the 5th episode. It's just I always remember the Next Generation, like, the captain's not supposed to go on crazy away missions. That's the first officer's job, or he's supposed to help pick somebody that should go on this mission. And of course, Burnham goes on like damn near every mission. So it's kind of cool that Rayner called her out on it at first, but then it just turns out he was just hesitant to like be in command. So they kind of like watered that response down. Episode 6. This is one of the more classic Next Generation Star Trek, any kind of Star Trek episodes we get, where the pre-warp society, the crew has to disguise themselves as aliens, go down there and try to blend in. So it was interesting seeing Discovery really getting the chance to do that. To episode 7, some fun stuff with Reno in this episode. She also had a funny joke a couple episodes back when she was getting interviewed or interrogated, and she's like, "Hey, last time I did it." No, when she was with Rayner, she had to talk to him for the first time. She's like, "Last time I did this, there was chips," which is a funny callback to her season 2, I think. But anyways, episode 7 said Reno had some more funny stuff. It was nice that they brought Nan back. This is where they start trying to set up this whole Game of Thrones thing with the brain that doesn't quite work. And then I said, especially the longer it goes on, and then this is where we lose Locke, which I think the episode loses something. The season loses something after this. I don't know why Mal is like a super awesome fighter. Like, she kicked everyone's ass and pretty much escaped. Billy's Colbert had a couple decent moves for a doctor. Episode 8 is kind of crazy how much Mal was throwing her weight around. They really went over the top to make the Breen Primer look like an asshole, and it was almost too quick that he's an asshole. She points out he's an asshole. She kills him, and the rest of the Breen like, well, all right, I guess you're our leader now until we resurrect Locke. I was a little disappointed. There's cool using modern technology to show the Badlands, but it didn't look anything like the Badlands from Star Trek, like the old Star Trek shows, because they had kind of like the ceiling and this kind of floor of like plasma, and these big thing was these like tornadoes. And here was just a bunch of like fire. I think there would have been a better way to adapt it with the new technology and still kind of keep those fire tornadoes. Have some channels where it's like you kind of see that ceiling in the ground and the tornadoes, and maybe you put some more stuff in the middle here and there, make it look dangerous. The Mindscape thing was okay. Basically, I thought there was gonna be more to it than Burnham just basically, essentially going like a confessional, like, oh, I got all these, character flaws, and the thing being like, all right, that's what we wanted to hear. Here's your next clue. I get to episode 9. It was kind of stupid because Discovery gets there. They had a little bit of trouble because they got too close to the black holes, and then they're studying this thing. It's like, okay, it's this, it's that, trying to figure out what to do. It's like, okay, let's grab it, and like the Breen just show up and immediately like take it. Like Burnham comes up with this crazy plan, like pretty damn quick. It's like, oh, we're gonna do this, this, and this, and obviously didn't work out exactly the way it was supposed to, but it did for a large part. It's like, wow, that's a pretty ballsy plan to come up with, like, off the cuff like that. They kind of said this big dramatic thing about how Rayner hadn't taken the captain's chair since he came aboard. Even when Burnham wasn't around. They made it a semi-dramatic moment. It was kind of nice when he finally sits down. It's like, okay, let's do this. So I thought that was okay. Again, there's a kind of a mini arc for his character for this season. Season finale. I thought the progenitor initial part of the thing inside the portal looked kind of cool. It was kind of weird. They mentioned all these like portals to the other world, but it really didn't feel like we were seeing that. We had a way. I didn't realize that's what we were seeing until Burnham said something. Oh yeah, these are portals to the other world. I'm kind of glad they got the big fist fight with her and Mal out of the way early, because it would have. I was expecting like they get to the thing and then they have to beat the shit out of each other to see who gets it. Very surprising to find out that the progenitors didn't even create this tech. It was like stuff that predates them, so they had their own progenitors. Again, I wish we would have got learn more about their people from the one progenitor was there, especially now that no one's ever really going to go back to there. Again, it was probably a budget thing, but man, I would have liked to seen this. We had a pretty massive space battle. You got Discovery fighting like 40 Breen fighter ships, and the whole thing going on with the main ships. It's like, okay, this could be pretty cool. They barely show it, and then all 40 Breen ships were kind of dumb enough to follow Discovery through this like plasma thing. It seemed like they should have known as well. Like, oh, we better be careful flying in this plasma, because if it gets ignited, this could blow us up. And then they followed them right in there and fell for it, which is kind of like, are they that dumb? Apparently, Discovery could do a saucer separation. Usually, saucer separation is like a big, cool sequence, and it's like you barely see it separate. And then they do this new thing with from pretty far away. You see them doing like a sandwich with the Breen ship, and somehow they're able to send it across the galaxy. And there's not too much else that I haven't discussed already. That they kind of brushed through the wedding pretty quickly. We get this 40-year in the future thing, which was fine. Like, kind of seeing Burnham passing now, not knowledge, but advice on to her son who's becoming a captain. So that was a fine epilogue for them, for, Burnham and Booker, and have the kid and this little happy, Neropenthe style, like lifestyle going on there. Thought the weird flashback, not even flashback, where Burnham gets into Discovery and it's like, this is where my friend is, this is my home, and then it's just this weird 2-3 minute long like hug fest where it's like, hey, Tilly's shaking this, hugging him, and they're hugging him, and everyone's hugging each other, and it was just kind of like a memory sort of thing in her mind, but it was like, I kind of get the impression that's all when they brought everybody back for reshoots. It's like, okay, we got this whole thing with Burnham and Book. You guys are just gonna kind of hug each other, and that's all we got for you. So I thought that was a little disappointing. I thought we were gonna have a little bit more follow up with all the characters if they took the time to bring them back. But like I said, I discussed a lot of this earlier in this review, which felt like a while ago. This feels like this is a long review, but I think that's all I got. I don't want to go on forever. Like I said, I got the much shorter version of this on my blog. There's other reviews on there, TV shows, movies, a couple video game reviews. I got some comic strips. That's all at soundedbettermyhead.com, so if you want to check that out, that's pretty awesome. Other than that, thanks for watching.